How do you do? I'm going to make a little brief introduction. I will lead off by talking about Trump's nomination in the Republican convention in Cleveland on the 21st of July, which seems like a long time ago. And Dave DeWitt is Athens' great reporter, journalist, and he and I will have kind of a spontaneous discussion about the Cleveland Convention. Dave DeWitt writes for the Athens News, and he even wrote some columns for the Athens Messenger on a guest basis, I guess. And I would also like to remind everybody that the convention in Cleveland opened on the 18th of July, 2016, and closed on the 21st. And this is already August, so there's a big gap between the event and now. So today is August 2nd, 2016, and the title is A First-Hand Report from the Republican Convention in Cleveland, which nominated Donald Trump. And we're going to discuss this with Dave DeWitt of the Athens News, reporter and editorialist. And this is called Athens Speakout number 375. Now, Trump closed with a speech that was kind of unique for Mr. Trump. But he had already won the nomination before he ever got to Cleveland by votes. But he made a long hour-and-a-half speech, which might have been drafted by somebody else. And he had to stick to the text, but he always wanted it off now and then. Anyway, he was elected on the basis of his so-called charisma, but he had a long denunciation of blacks, Hispanics, women throughout this campaign. And there were few, if any, media TV people that liked Donald Trump, although they tried to play it half and half for the benefit of the voters. Anyway, he got most of his votes from white rural Southerners who didn't have much education beyond high school, and they had a very naive interpretation of the Old Testament and the New Testament. And I would like to define my own branch of Christianity. I have a very broad definition. A Christian is a follower of Jesus Christ. But the old-time religion had very specific creeds. And the Methodists didn't like the Catholics, and the Catholics didn't like the Orthodox, and there was a lot of little religious controversy about the fine points of theology. That's the heritage of American Christian religion that we began with when George Washington was president. And since then, it's become more liberal over time, but rather slowly in the case of the South and Mr. Trump in particular. Anyway, would you want to say anything about that introduction from your observations? Well, I made a mistake, or would you like to correct me? Or
No, I don't have any corrections for you. I think that you did a good job. I was very surprised by the length of Trump's speech. I was expecting like maybe 45 minutes. I think it was 75 minutes or so. And I
Were you bored?
Yes, actually. I was, and very tired. I had been working 14-hour days all week. I had walked over 30 miles that week around the city of Cleveland.
And he didn't say anything you didn't hear before.
He didn't say anything new, and by that time it was about midnight in the Quicken Loans Arena, and I had a 3.5-hour drive back to Athens ahead of me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, to be perfectly honest, yes, I was bored and exhausted, and I was ready for him to wrap it up so that I could drive home and go to bed.
Interesting. Well, I will start off with another statement. I read a column in the Athens Messenger by Clarence Page, who was a critic of Trump, since Clarence Page is a black and he's a graduate of Ohio University's journalism school, and he's had a very good job in the Chicago Tribune, which has a huge black population in Chicago. Anyway, the title of his piece is Destroying the Islamic State Quickly. That's the way he entitled Trump's campaign. And he gave that as his final word on the 21st of July, according to Page. And it was Page who told me anyway, that his speech was 1 hour and 40 minutes long, one of the longest speeches in history. Although I recall Bill Clinton made a long speech back in 1992 when he was the keynote speaker for Dukakis, and everybody criticized Bill Clinton for his lengthy speech. So that'll be an interesting comparison if anybody wants to look into that. Anyway, according to Trump, he didn't offer any solutions, and he tried to, Trump's excuse was, well, I don't have to appoint a Secretary of State. I don't have to appoint a Secretary of Defense or Treasury. I will tell you what I'm going to do after the election. Believe me, man, that's my speech. And he gave that, believe me, man, every can close. And the Democrats made a lot of hay out of that. Anybody who says, believe me, man, is suspect. Why do we want to believe this man? Well, anyway, it was Clarence Page who cited Richard Hofstadter, The Paranoid Style of American Politics, published in 1964. And this was a psychological interpretation of American history. And this came out just the time that Lyndon Johnson was beginning his campaign. And of course, Hofstadter was Jewish from Columbia and was against Johnson's escalation of the war. And I was introduced to Hofstadter as I was becoming more critical of Johnson, because I began researching my PhD thesis in 1959, 1960, and sitting next to me in a desk was a student of Hofstadter by the name of Robert Dallek. Well, Dallek has gone to the top of the profession, and he's written about a dozen books on American presidents. And he is a better known historian than John Gaddis, Ohio University's best historian so far. Anyway, the Jews are generally liberal and generally democratic, and Dallek, like his mentor, was a great fan of Hofstadter. But as he grew older, he became less and less enthused with Hofstadter and has written more documented political history with footnotes, and he's become a more conservative diplomatic historian in his own right. But when Hofstadter retired, Dallek got the chair at Columbia, and he's now teaching that American diplomatic history course there as a distinguished professor. Mm-hmm. So that's the. When I read Page's article, I was kind of personally acquainted with the ins and outs of the essay. Now, one comment that Page made, which I disagree with, he called Trump a Machiavellian. I don't think that's quite right. I don't think that Trump has the ability to be a Machiavellian. A Machiavellian is like Henry Kissinger. He reads a dozen books, and he knows how to think like a German or French or Russian and can put himself in the shoes of foreign diplomats. Bismarck was a Machiavellian. Metternich was a Machiavellian. But I don't think Trump has ever read a book in his life, as far as I can see. We're waiting.
His ghostwriter said that explicitly. He doesn't believe that Donald Trump has ever read a book cover to cover in his entire adult life.
Well, that's the end of Donald Trump, as far as I'm concerned.
That's the man that wrote Donald Trump's book. That's who said that.
Who was that author?
I forget his name. It was his ghostwriter. It was Donald Trump's ghostwriter for The Art of the Deal.
Well, do you think that text that he gave as a speech was written by the ghostwriter?
Oh, no, I don't know about the speech. A speechwriter wrote a speech. I know Donald Trump didn't write it.
He has a couple of...
one of those speechwriters wrote a speech. Not
anyway.
the ghostwriter I'm talking about is the one who wrote The Art of the Deal, that book.
Art of the Deal?
Yeah, Donald Trump's book.
I've never heard of it. The deal is a real estate deal.
Any deal, apparently.
I know how to cheat the customer. I know how to cheat the plumbers,
Fleece the customer?
And the carpenters and the workers.
That's how to fleece the plumbers and the workers? Yeah.
Well, you can underpay them.
Or not pay them at all.
Or make the casino go bankrupt.
Fight it out in court.
Oh, yeah, he can make a deal. Well, beware. Buyer beware. That is the cliche of capitalism. Let the buyer beware.
Yeah, that's true. I think if this election is an art of a deal, I think the voters should beware.
Well, I think I make enough fun on that question. Maybe we ought to ask you a question.
Okay.
Unless you want to make a comment about Page.
No, yeah. I mean, I enjoy his work. That's
okay. I'm going to ask you, have you got a insight into Trump's character? And you've already more or less covered that spontaneously on the last day of the convention. So I guess you don't have any more details, except that I want to show the audience. This was your great election coverage. Do you want to say something specifically about that article?
Yeah, so what I did with this article is, obviously there were tens of thousands of news articles written about this convention where it's, writing it as a straight news piece about what happened. And so what I wanted to do differently in this piece was to give an impressionistic article of what it was like to be there on the ground in the city of Cleveland and what I saw and what I experienced. So I wrote it from a first-person narrative standpoint, and I basically just described what I was doing each day and what I was seeing and what I was hearing and what it felt like to be there in Cleveland to try to bring people into the experience with me. I didn't want to write in the Messenger, you mentioned that I had an article in the Messenger. That was just a news article. That was news coverage, and I did that as a Adams Publishing Group correspondent.
I see.
And
you're
that
a little bit more balanced.
That
you didn't want to touch.
Yeah, it wasn't subjective at all. It was written in regular news writing format.
And nobody could see that you were biased against Trump.
Well, right, exactly. And it was published in a dozen different papers across the country.
Did you get a royalty on that?
Well, it's part of the Adams Publishing Group that owns all these papers. So I was sent there as a correspondent for them.
Oh, I see.
So that I would provide this pool coverage and do that, straight news story that people could use in all these different papers.
Well, good.
What I did for
You're
the
a
Athens
national
News,
figure
though,
now.
right? Oh yeah, gaining in prominence every day.
Good.
But yeah, what I wanted to do for the news though was write something a little bit more unique and individualized, and so that's what I was trying to do there.
Yeah.
So.
Did you learn anything from other correspondents? Or didn't have any time?
I didn't. Well, it's always fun to hang out with a bunch of journalists because you crack a lot of jokes and you talk to people, and I ended up
to previous conventions and so forth. And
right.
Give you a little history of that.
Yeah, and I haven't been to a convention since 2008 when I went to both conventions.
Well, that's more than I have.
In 2008,
I've never
so I
been to a
didn't go to
convention.
either of the 2012 conventions. So it was nice to get back to Cleveland at least this year. I wanted to go to Philadelphia too, but that didn't work out. So
Yeah, right.
I made it to Cleveland though, and I was happy to be there.
All right.
That is the thing about those conventions. You do end up seeing a lot of other mostly politicians and news people there.
Right.
So a lot of familiar faces. I think I ran into Tom Brokaw like 5 different times. And the first time I saw him, it was like, "Oh, Mr. Brokaw, it's nice to meet you. Yeah, I really respect your work." And by the 5th time you see him, your buddies is like, "Hey, Brokaw, how you doing?
Good.
You're everywhere."
But I'm
going,
afraid
man?
he will forget you next year.
There's no way that he remembers me in any way. But it's fun to banter with them occasionally.
Yeah.
I had lunch next with Howard Feynman, the chief political correspondent for Newsweek formerly. Now he's the global politics editor for AOL Huffington Post.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a funny story because I was sitting at a place called Pickwick and Frolic on East 4th Street right outside the convention center. And I'm sitting there eating a pizza, drinking a Coke, and this gentleman comes up next to me. And he starts talking very rapidly to the bartender. He's like, I know your kitchen's about to close. I'm going to need something to eat. I want to get a pizza. I want to get that order in right away. What type of pizza is that? And he's pointing to my pizza. And I'm like, I don't know, pepperoni? I don't know. And he's like, well, I want one of those pizzas and then come back for my drink order. He sits down and he asks me what I do, and I say that I work for a newspaper in Athens, Ohio, and he starts talking to me about Ohio University, and he knows all this stuff about the journalism school.
Wow.
And I didn't know who this guy was. I thought it was just some dude sitting next to me. I didn't know him. My buddy comes back from the bathroom, and he recognizes him because I guess they had met before.
He used to write for Time magazine.
And he said, yeah. And he says, oh, Howard Feynman.
Newsweek,
right.
Yeah.
Oh, Howard Feynman. And I was sitting here talking to Howard Feynman. I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
And so we ended up having lunch with him. And then this other guy comes in. His name is Roger Stone, and he was a hatchet man for Richard Nixon, a political operative for the Republicans for the last 30 years. Kind of a notorious figure. There's all sorts of
rumors about him.
Humorous stories about some of the shadier stuff that he's done. But he comes in. He recognizes Feynman. They talk to each other, and it ends up me and my friend, another journalist, sitting there having lunch with Roger Stone and Howard Feynman at Pickwick and Frolic. And those are the types of weird situations that you find yourself in.
You kept your ears open and your mouth closed.
Right. Exactly. That's right. But that's the fun part of the conventions is you never know who you're going to be standing next to all of a sudden. Like Mike Huckabee and I stood in line next to each other for about 20 minutes waiting to get cleared by the U.S. Secret Service to get into the convention.
You had an opportunity to interview him?
I didn't really interview him. I just talked to him for a little bit about how Cleveland.
Yeah, you didn't want to get into the nitty-gritty.
Right, exactly. Ted Koppel, Chuck Todd. I mean, just all sorts of people you see everywhere. So it's fun in that respect.
Right. Good. Well, I have a little criticism of your comment about a phrase called the establishment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any such thing as the establishment. We have 6 or 7 establishments. Number 1, the Republican National Committee. Number 2, the Democratic National Committee. Number 3, Wall Street. Number 4, Hollywood. Number 5, the newspapers. Number 6, the TV establishment. Number 7, the global oil cartels. I might be able to think of some more.
Mm-hmm.
But do you agree with that idea? We have to be careful?
No, I think you can break it down. I don't think that the establishment, and I hope I put it in quotes because I usually do.
Well, I don't know whether you did or didn't.
It's not a monolithic creature that shares the same interests
but you see,
across the board.
The voters believe that.
Yeah, no, I know they do. That's why I usually put it in quotes
as
the establishment, because if you have any sense of nuance, and life is full of nuance, everything's gray, nothing's black and white, shades of gray.
Right.
It's not a monolithic, singular-minded, singular-focused entity that everyone's They don't all meet at the Bilderberg, every year and decide on their agenda, and everyone supports the same exact thing. There's competing interests all the time across the board. So,
well, Bilderberg, like the Council on Foreign Relations, is a coalition of different nationalities.
Yeah.
In other words, after the First World War, the Council on Foreign Relations was created. And they put out an official magazine called Foreign Affairs.
Yes.
Now, they imitated the British government because the British government had kind of a particular journal, you know, the Royal Council on International Affairs. That was the British thing, the Royal Institute on International Affairs. That was established before World War I, you see. And this is a high-class, educational, low-key propaganda organization to promote British foreign policy throughout the world.
Right.
So it's scholarly, but it's also got a little bit of a propaganda tinge to
That's
it.
like the Council on Foreign Relations.
That's right. That's right. So if you're Henry Kissinger, or if you're
Zbigniew Brzezinski.
yeah, Brzezinski or Dean Acheson, and practically any Secretary of State can write an article and get in there.
Right.
I could never write a article
And get published and
Foreign
see it.
Relations.
Yeah.
Now, I did meet a guy on the Spanish Civil War who got into Council on Foreign Relations because I became an expert on the Spanish Civil War.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And one of my favorite historians was a guy named Herbert Southworth. And he was a working class man who got into scholarship through the Spanish Civil War. He was originally working, he was born in, I think he was born in Oklahoma, but he got a job in Arizona in the mines. Okay, when the Depression came, he lost his job. So he goes to Texas, and he goes to the same college that Lyndon Johnson went, St. Marcos State. And he majors in Spanish. And he got a BA in the Spanish language. And he got a job for the Library of Congress. And he came to Washington, and he was classifying Latin American books in the Spanish language in the Library of Congress in 1936.
Wow.
When the Spanish Civil War broke out. Well, he had his heart in labor unions and left-wing politics. He used to read The Nation magazine and New Republic as a kid. So he started writing book reviews for the Washington Post. And they had a guy on the right, I think it was some Catholic, somebody on the right and Southworth on the left. And he kept writing articles in favor of the Spanish Republic. Well, the Spanish Republicans lost, and he was out of a job, but he was rehired. He was rehired by Franklin Roosevelt because Franklin Roosevelt organized his own propaganda agency called the Office of War Information, the OWI. And Roosevelt recruited all of these unemployed New Deal journalists to work for OWI. So Southworth was stationed in Tangier, right off the coast of Spain. And at that point, they were trying to keep Franco neutral, try to keep Franco out of joining the Axis full blast.
Right.
He was already leaning toward the Axis, but he had a kind of a balance of power game in which he was anti-Soviet, but he had to butter up the United States and Britain because he needed American wheat, American cotton, American oil, and jute and tin from the British Empire. He was dependent on raw materials. So the United States and Britain were able to keep Franco neutral and not joining the Axis. Okay. Well, anyway, the OWI used to broadcast this American line in Spanish to the Spanish people under Franco's domination, see? Well, then, after the war, he decides to stay in Morocco. He doesn't want to come back to America because he was tinged with Popular Front. They were under suspicion. So he marries a French woman who worked for the French Popular Front. And he opens up the first radio station, free enterprise, in Morocco. and he sells advertisement in order to broadcast anti-Franco stuff from French Morocco.
Okay.
Okay. Well, then since he had good ties with the French, he goes to France and gets his PhD from Sorbonne. And he did his PhD on the bombing of Guernica. And he had that PhD published after he was over 50, he was between 50 or 60 years old.
Wow.
He had it published in English, in French, and in Spanish simultaneously.
Wow. Yeah.
And of course, I became friends with him. Anyway, he told me the story of how he got into journalism and how a journalist got into history. It's a good biographical story.
That sounds great. Yeah. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, anyway, to get back to this.
Well, let me just say that when your breakdown of the establishment into those different categories, I think, is absolutely fair.
Right.
Because there are different interests.
Right.
You can call these entrenched interests in different
Right.
areas.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they necessarily all share the same interests all
Right.
the time.
Now,
I think your criticism is totally fair.
the British do have an establishment.
Well, the royal family?
The royal family and the Church of England
Yeah.
is the establishment in Great Britain.
Well, they have an establishment
Okay.
of
Now, the First
incestuous blood
Amendment,
royalty.
the First Amendment of the American Constitution defines what the establishment is. And I have to quote this every
Oh,
It says, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion
yeah.
or the prohibiting of the free exercise thereof, or the abridging of the freedom of speech or freedom of press and the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. What the establishment means in the United States is that Congress cannot finance and collect taxes to subsidize any private religion.
Right.
So the Methodists, the Catholics, the Jews, they all have to collect their own money. And they can't have tax-supported religion. Now, the Roman Catholic Church was established in Austria, and they have an established Catholic Church. The Irish Church, the Spanish Church, and they are beginning to get disestablished in the 20th century. Okay.
Right.
That's very important to me and for my understanding of history and this campaign, because this campaign is making me rethink the differences between America and its multinational ethnic groups and its many religious groups.
Uh-huh.
And I have to be aware of that. Now, the French have disestablished the Roman Catholic Church over a long period of time.
Yeah. Well,
First
they got
Republic,
very
Second
bloody.
Republic, Third Republic. And
yeah.
in 1905, they disestablished the French Catholic Church again. And now they're in trouble with Islam, because so many Frenchmen have become what they call secularists or laity. The Islamic people can carry off acts of terror, and the French are in more difficulty than either the British or the Germans or the Americans.
Well, the French have, I think that the French have enacted some laws that were self-defeating as far as their disestablishment goes. So, like laws that, for instance, ban the wearing of a burqa in public and whatnot.
Yeah, because they banned the crucifix. So I said, okay, crucifix and burqa.
So I think that that's going a step too far.
From your point of view.
Well, of course, it's my opinion. Of course it is. But if you're, in a way, that is setting up a certain amount of regard or respect for secularism that isn't afforded to those who are religious. And when you do that, I think that you make yourself vulnerable to attacks from the religious.
That's right.
And, combine that with, their other vulnerabilities as far as proximity to the Middle East, as far as the available guns in Belgium that can easily cross the border into France and be used to terrorize the French people. those types of things set France up to be victimized more often than some of its other European
Right.
allies.
Oh, well, we've moving rather slowly. I think we ought to change to another statement.
Okay.
We're discussing the controversial Cleveland Convention and its Democratic and Republican and religious problems. And so my second statement is, and this is Dave DeWitt from the Athens News. My name is Robert Whaley, retired historian who's studied the history of presidential races in my time and going back to Franklin Roosevelt through my father's time. So I have a first-hand acquaintance of Franklin Roosevelt. And I voted in 1960 for Kennedy and graduated from high school in 1948 when Truman was elected. So I relate history to present-day politics. Well, anyway, second statement is an interpretation of Trump's speech in Cleveland on the 21st of July from Robert Reich, professor of economics at Berkeley, California, who voted for Sanders in the primary and teaches economics at the University of California. And he kind of now has to go along with Hillary. And Robert Reich used to work for the Bill Clinton administration in his first term. But he was either forced to resign or quit on his own after the first term in 1992 and 1996. And he turned to academia. And so he knows the weaknesses of Bill Clinton and he knows the strengths. So I think he's a good commentator on where we go from here. And so I follow Reich's columns.
Yeah, I like Reich a lot.
Very, very carefully. Anyway, do you want to have any comments about that article? Did you read that article or see that particular article or other articles?
I've seen a lot of Reich stuff. I'm not sure if I read that specific one.
Yeah.
But I enjoy Reich's work, and he has an interesting perspective as Bill Clinton's former labor secretary and also a classmate with Bill Clinton in Oxford when they were Rhodes Scholars together. So he's known Bill for a long time. And the divisions that this election year have brought about, I think, are significant. And Reich is good about being having disagreement without being disrespectful or
he's a good Democrat. He's going to keep the party united.
He writes from an intellectual level. It's
economics first.
Yeah,
economics
it's
first.
not on a personal attack level.
That's right.
It's an intellectual differences that he's exploring, and I appreciate that distinction.
David, before you go on, I would like to ask, you mentioned earlier that you'd gone to 2008 convention. And
Yeah, both
2012.
conventions in 2008. I did not get to the 2012 ones.
Now, my question is, how did the 2008 conventions and this 2016 convention, how did they differ?
Okay, yeah. Well, I'll kind of go over what it's like to be at a convention just to begin with. It's as if whatever city you're in, the downtown of that city, everything about that city has been transformed into a 4-day political carnival. Everywhere you go, it's a carnival-esque event, except for everything revolves around politics, and everybody comes out of the woodwork to show their cause, their support, whatever it may be, their individual things. So the conventions, as far as the feel of being in the city, are all very similar, except for that you see different groups, whether you're at the Republican convention or the Democratic convention, you see different counter groups. So in Cleveland this year, I guess the main difference between what I saw in Cleveland as far as the activists go, and what I saw in 2008 at the Republican convention is you see different groups of activists. So Black Lives Matter exists now and didn't exist in 2008 as a movement. So you see those, and the Revolutionary Communist Party, the ones who set the flag on fire in public square that started a little bit of a tiff, they weren't around in 2008. But Code Pink, for instance, who kept getting into the convention and having protesters stand up and interrupt the speeches, they were around in 2008. So you see changes and overlaps there that basically reflect the changes that we've seen in the national dialogue as well. The evangelicals have had a very strong presence at both the 2008 and 2016 conventions. From what I saw, there's a lot at the Republican conventions, at least. You don't see as many of them, and they're not as prominent at the Democratic conventions. But the evangelicals are there with their signs,
Do you
basically
think they're
saying,
gaining or losing between
evangelicals?
2016, going back to that other convention?
Well, these are the same people that you see up on Court Street in Halloween who
You
have the
couldn't-
big signs that say that everyone's going to hell, and they got the,
you didn't see any difference. You didn't know who's behind them.
Not really, no. I mean, it's the same type of people.
And you didn't talk to any delegates who were true believers.
I did interview delegates, and most of them, not evangelical specifically delegates. I interviewed a variety of delegates, and they all just basically
They
wanted to...
steer away from religion.
Yeah. They wanted to pitch the line of party unity. Everyone's coming together around Trump, and the speeches have been fantastic, and all that sort of stuff. So it's just the differences are which groups you see as activists and what type of activism they're doing.
Well, to go to a third interpretation of that Trump nomination speech on the 21st of July, there was an article by Mary Sanchez in the Athens News, and she calls Donald Trump narcissistic. I'm not too sure about that, but it's a $5 word, and what it means is you put I first.
Well, yeah.
You
don't think that he's... Well, I don't use the word narcissistic for Donald Trump. I prefer to use either egomaniacal...
Egomaniacal, okay. He's a maniac.
Well, yeah, you mentioned earlier that he didn't offer solutions during his speech. Well, no, not on a policy level. He didn't offer any tangible, policy solutions that would be, considered or recognized by any sort of scholars or think tanks or academia. He did offer a solution, though. His solution is Donald Trump.
Yeah.
His solution is himself.
Well, that faces fascism. That is dangerous.
I agree. I absolutely agree. But if you listen to his speech, that was his solution to whatever problem there is. The solution is he's going to fix it.
Narcissistic is a polite way of
he's
saying
going to make it
fascist.
Absolutely. I don't see any reason to be polite about it.
Well, I think what Mary Sanchez meant, since she was a Hispanic, was that, and I think this is true, no doubt, Donald Trump consistently denounced Hispanics for their inherited ethnicity. If you happen to have a grandfather who came from Mexico, you're still not a real American, according to
Like the judge in the Trump University case.
And that's what she was hinting at.
He was born in Indiana, but becomes of his lineage.
So we have to, I think, though, that the Republicans have a good issue
Texan.
on immigration, because there is going to be a long debate in the future on a comprehensive immigration policy. They're hypocritical. They're both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats.
Immigration is an issue, and we do need to have comprehensive immigration legislation.
That's
something on the order of what was proposed by John McCain and Russ Feingold in 2007, I believe.
Yeah, but I think.
But politically, you can't. That was truly a nuts and bolts, policy-heavy act of legislation, and the immigration issue is so politicized in this election year.
Right.
that it's being wielded like a sledgehammer. I don't see how you can get the nuances of finely tuned legislation
Well, you
into
can't
the
until the
current
election
debate.
is over. But what
Right,
but
not
what I'm
until the
saying, no
election's
matter
over.
who wins, there are going to have to be detailed hearings on a bipartisan basis. Now, the McCain-Feingold, the McCain-Shermer bill.
Sure, it was Shermer.
Shermer's from New York.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
Jewish.
Chuck.
All right, now
Schumer,
he's got a sensitive, emotional attitude toward immigration because of what
It
happened.
was McCain-Feingold campaign finance.
All right, no, I'm sorry, I
McCain's-
made a mistake.
Yeah, no, that's
it's
mine.
McCain, Shermer.
Schumer, yeah.
Schumer. Okay.
Charles Schumer.
Yeah, Chuck
Chuck Schumer. He has a sensitivity about immigration because of his Jewish background. Because Jews were discriminated against in World War II, and they couldn't get entry in the United States because of immigration quotas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one side of the case. On the other side, Arizona, and where McCain comes from, wants Mexicans to come to pick the cantaloupe and pick the cotton for this state. So there's hypocrisy in the Democratic Party and in the Republican Party. The Republicans want more immigration to do the work. The Democrats want more immigration to load up the ballot boxes with future Democratic votes. So I'm neutral on what we're going to have to do, but there's going to have to be some serious discussion for the future of the United States, because illegal immigrants versus undocumented immigrants is a game of media, okay? Either the immigrations are illegal or they're not. And undocumented is just a euphemism to hide up the problem of the quotas of some kind are going to have to be established because the world is overpopulated. Climate change. You cannot admit every immigrant that wants to come to the United States in. Mm-hmm. So hypocrisy on the part of all the religions, all of the ethnic groups. And we don't have an honest immigration bill yet. Hopefully we'll get a better one after the election.
Wishful thinking.
Wishful thinking, yes. Anyway, I think Sanchez has a good point, but I think she probably sold her case a little bit too much, because I, as a white in Athens, Ohio, have no interest in bringing more Mexican laborers to Southeast Ohio that has surplus labor, and we have plenty of people who can't get jobs in coal mines. Mm-hmm. So there's a certain validity to the West Virginia vote. We do need to have jobs to replace. If you're going to have climate change, you're going to have to do some retraining of those coal miners. Anyway, she was a little bit too subtle and subjective for me. Unless you have a further disagreement, we'll let that case go. Anyway, you want to say anything about the roll call vote for Trump? Was it worth counting?
There was a very token attempt to stop to have the roll call vote and to challenge his nomination, but like I said, it was a very token attempt. It wasn't. Right. It never had any serious chance of real challenge from anything that I witnessed.
The real novelty was the vice presidential nomination. Mike Pence, governor of Indiana. Do you want to say anything about the vice president nominee?
So what I think the Trump team was trying to do with this, there's a couple different levels that I want to touch on. First, the report from John Kasich was that Donald Trump had offered him the job of vice president, and he met with one of Kasich's senior, Donald Trump Jr. met with one of Kasich's senior campaign staffers, And they had a conversation, and Trump Jr. said that Kasich as VP would be in charge of both foreign and domestic policy. And the guy asked Trump Jr. what Donald Trump would be in charge of, and he said, with a straight face apparently, making America great again. So Trump
Propaganda.
got...
Propaganda's achieved.
Right. So Trump got denied by Kasich, which I think is both hilarious and awesome. It's one of the things that Kasich's ever done in his career that I, can fully support. But so he wanted an experienced governor, so that's why he went with Pence. He wanted an experienced governor from the Midwest, so Pence from Indiana makes a lot of sense. What does it do for him politically? Not a lot, except for that the evangelicals and the Christian right have been rightfully wary of Trump because he doesn't come off as a particularly religious person.
Right.
Pence is a very religious fundamentalist Christian who shores up the conservative Christian vote for Trump. So people who might have been hesitant to go to the polls and vote for Trump because he's not particularly religious might be more likely to do so now because Pence is on the ticket. What I don't think that it does for him politically is win him anyone that wasn't going to vote Republican anyway. There aren't, a lot of evangelical voters who are going to vote for Pence and Trump now because Pence is on the ticket, who were ever considering voting Democratic anyway. They weren't. They don't vote Democratic. So he did a good job with a candidate who will help get those votes that might have been hesitant, but he didn't steal any votes away from the Democrats by picking
No
Pence.
Democrat will vote for either one of them.
And and like I said, Democrats aren't going to vote for Pence because he's a religious fundamentalist. He's he's a hardliner on issues, on all the social cultural issues.
That's right. I would like to qualify this evangelical a bit. I looked at the Wikipedia article on Pence.
Mm-hmm.
He calls himself an evangelical Catholic.
Yeah, I know.
He is a Roman Catholic.
Yeah. And I don't know what that seems like almost a contradiction to me.
Well, I thought it was a contradiction.
Yeah.
So I looked it up and I looked at his record, and what it means is he's an Irish Catholic who was appalled by John the 23rd and Francis.
Yeah.
They are too left-wing for him.
Right.
He wants to have a throwback. He wants to go back to the past
Right.
of the Latin Mass. Pope Pius XII.
Right.
So
Yeah.
this is a kind of I think Pence is worse than Trump.
Yeah. I'll leave it to you to analyze his spiritual.
Anyway, as you say, he's against abortion. He's against
all the. So you can go down the list of social issues, and Pence is on the extreme right.
Extreme right of everything.
Yeah.
So I don't think he does have government. He does have practical governmental hands-on campaign experience.
Yeah.
And he can go around to Pennsylvania and Ohio and make a credible speech for the old-fashioned religion, the old-time religion, but don't get too specific of what that means.
Right.
Okay, I got some laughs out of his thing.
I'm glad that you enjoyed that. That makes me happy.
Yeah, so he's a religious conservative, which means he is sympathetic to the old-fashioned Catholicism and also Southern Baptist Church in Dallas. Mm-hmm. He's bridging a kind of a funny religion anyway. John Kerry is a liberal Catholic. John Kennedy is a liberal Catholic.
Right. Pope
He's
Francis.
a broad-minded Catholic, broad-minded Christian. So anyway, birth control. He wants to defund birth.
Yeah, no birth control, no abortion, no exceptions.
Right.
You could go, like I said, 100% rating for all the check marks,
Right. Okay. So anyway, I guess I don't have anything more to say about Pence, except that he's an ideological, reactionary, or backward-looking personality who's more fanatic than a demagogue. A demagogue is unstable. You don't know what is predictable. Pence is very predictable.
Yeah.
He's going to be on the right on every issue.
Right.
So there is a slight difference between them. Anyway, do you want to
I
say?
do think that the contradiction between Pence and Trump on trade
They
is
do have
significant. They have a huge contradiction.
I missed that. What is that about?
Well, Pence has supported every trade deal that's come down the pike since
That's Wall Street.
2000, you know? And he's supported the TPP, and he's supported the global markets and free trade and all that stuff, like in a very significant hardline way. Obviously, Trump is coming in here with this rhetoric about, you know, we don't win any more, we don't win any of these deals, Mexico's beating us, China's beating us, everyone's beating us, he's essentially protectionist. There is nothing in Pence's voting history or political
He's a little bit
history
more loyal to
that
Wall
is
Street.
protectionist in any way whatsoever. So they were on 60 Minutes, and Leslie Stahl was asking them about that.
I didn't see that.
And saying, well, your vice presidential nominee here has voted for all these trade deals that you say America's losing on.
Yeah.
And Trump says, oh no, I'm for free trade.
Yeah.
And oh, and then the other thing that happened in that 60 Minutes interview that was significant is that Mike Pence voted for George W. Bush's war in Iraq. And Trump has, gone after Hillary Clinton time and time again for this vote supporting the war in Iraq.
He says he's going to take care of ISIS.
And-
How's he going to do that?
And Mike Pence voted for the same war, and Leslie Stahl asked Donald Trump, how is it okay for Mike Pence to vote for it, but it's not okay for Hillary? And Donald Trump said, "Oh no, he can make that mistake, but she can't." So I mean,
but how's he going to take care of ISIS in the future with the next terrorist attack?
how's he going to take care of ISIS without knowing the difference between the Kurds and the Sunnis and the Shia? He doesn't know.
He's going to take care of ISIS.
But that's his whole, yeah. I mean, he doesn't know the interest groups. He doesn't know the Kurds' relationship to Syria and the Kurds' relationship to Turkey, and he probably doesn't even know what the Kurds are, to tell you the truth.
Oh, boy, that's a funny one. Well, anyway.
But his solution,
the
again,
Republican
is
Party,
him. His
the
solution
Senate,
is me.
The Republican Party is sinking.
That I can tell you, we're going to win big, we're going to win huge, it's going to be phenomenal. Believe me. We're going to have so much winning, you're not going to know what to do with all the winning because Donald Trump. That's all he has to say. He doesn't have solutions.
Well, they're both campaigning in Ohio and Pennsylvania and Indiana.
They're hitting Ohio hard. They're going to hit Ohio hard for the rest of the year. But
the rest of the year.
For until November. But yeah, I mean, Ohio is the only one. So in order for Donald Trump to win, he has to win Ohio, he has to win Pennsylvania, and he has to win Florida. These are all states that Barack Obama won.
Right.
He has to flip all of those back to Republican. And Ohio, he's losing in Florida and Pennsylvania by 5 to 9 points in every poll.
Is that
Well,
right?
let's say 4 to 9 points in every poll.
Right.
Ohio is the only one where he's got a statistical tie. It's a dead heat. They almost always match tied up, 40-40, 44-44, somewhere around there,
Right.
So Donald Trump's going to be hitting, and Hillary, they're both going to be duking
He's
it
going to
out
come
in
to
Ohio.
Athens. They're going to come to Athens, huh?
Well, I don't know. I'd say be more likely to come to Marietta, but yeah. I mean, he'll be
in this district.
He'll be in this district. He'll be in this area. He'll be in this region.
And Hillary
He's
will
gotta
probably be in this district.
Hillary will be back again. If Hillary's not back again herself, Bill will be here.
Right.
President Obama might be here. Elizabeth Warren might be here.
Right.
She'll be sending people here.
Okay. Well, we might come to another statement on another pundit. Do you know anything about Cal Thomas?
No, not really, no.
Well, he's an oddball if there ever was one. He wrote about 5 columns for the Athens Messenger
Okay,
because they're very wishy-washy.
yeah.
How many minutes we got?
About
We've
5?
got about 2 minutes
2 minutes.
left.
We better leave Cal Thomas for the
Well, the
future.
whole thing about Cal Thomas is he writes in the Athens Messenger on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Is he a syndicated
Cal
columnist?
Thomas, George Will.
Yeah, okay. They're so
Yeah,
these are
I read
messenger
about 10 columns.
syndicates.
But if you watch a Messenger, he's in there quite often.
Yeah, but I only could understand about 2 paragraphs of it because he's a zigzag. You don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Is he endorsing Trump or not endorsing Trump?
There's another journalist that a liberal journalist that he goes up against. There's 2 of them together sometimes, and maybe that's in the
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about him a little
match, too.
more next time, and we're going to have to. It's going to take longer than we thought, but I don't think we're quite finished to Cleveland, and then we'll have to do Cleveland and Philadelphia, and then probably have to have a 3rd show.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, historians go slowly. Journalists want speed. So we've been summarizing, to summarize this campaign, we've been talking about, from our perspective, the instability of Donald Trump and the reactionary conservative philosophy of Pence, Steve Pence, and
Mike Pence
Mike
from
Pence,
Indiana.
yeah. And I don't have much hope in the future of the Republican Party, and I think the Democrats have a good chance of taking the Senate. Anyway, would you like to give your analysis of what we've been talking about?
No, I just want to say that I hope that you're right. I worry sometimes that,
Well,
but-
your polls it said we have to worry about Ohio, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm very scared that Ohio's going to go for Trump.
Right.
I think it's a very real possibility that they do. We've got a lot of campaign time left, but I still don't see a path for victory for him because Pennsylvania hasn't voted for a Republican since 1988.
Right.
And he's losing in the polls there. He's losing in the polls in Florida. So even if he wins Ohio, if he can't win Pennsylvania and Florida, he can't win the presidency.
Right.
So I don't see how he can win all 3, but we'll see.
Okay.
We've got a lot of time left. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for this debate, and our philosophy is that debate is the oxygen of democracy,
That's
and
right.
we'll have to continue the debate at least for another 2 weeks.
Until next time.